All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Iconic Dollcast. My name is Sage. Welcome back to another episode all about dolls. Today, we are talking about the one and only Ken. Yes, finally, today I have a big Ken collector on the show named Lindsay, and we are going to talk all about Ken's history, his controversy, his relevance, and where he stands today. I'm super excited about it. Before that, some quick life updates, I guess. Guys, my job, my real job, not my podcasting, not my Britney Spears custom dolls, my real job. It's getting pretty intense. I think I've said it on the show. I do direct a gymnastics gym in the area. We are getting into competition season, so things are getting very busy. We had a minor stress this week. Our first competition meet, we call them meets in gymnastics world, is I think the second weekend in May, and I still hadn't gotten my leotards for my team girls in yet. And it was just a whole thing. I was so stressed for nothing. They arrived yesterday. They're so cute. I'm super excited about it. But yeah, work has been keeping me super, super busy. Doll-wise, okay, today, what day is it? Today is April 29th. The 65th anniversary Fashionista Barbies. They're starting to show up. I did find one in the wild. I am waiting to get the rest of them. I ordered a few on Amazon, but I think those aren't shipping for a couple weeks still. I'm still on the lookout. I think once I get them all, then I'm going to share something. Just because if you've been listening to this show, I've just been super excited about these dolls for no reason, really, I guess. But I've been super excited, so I'm glad to see they're finally out because I literally have mentioned it in every episode, so that's great. I also have you guys seen this Mattel Barbie? They just put out this mini Barbie land, and it's it's literally Polly Pocket size Barbie stuff. There's houses, boats, planes, so many characters. You can get these little lipsticks, and there's a mystery figure inside, and you guys know I love a mystery box. So I scooped all of these up. It was so exciting. I played with it for 2 hours when I got them. I ordered it all on Amazon. It came the next day, and then I went to Walmart and I found all the little mystery packs you could get. I had so much fun setting this up. It's so cute. I love how it's all mini Barbies of current Barbies that are out right now or coming out, and most of those are these 65th anniversary fashionistas inspired by the iconic looks. I love it so much. I can't wait for the rest of my dolls to get here so I can do a picture of all my dolls with their dolls. Very exciting. It's the little things that make me so happy when it comes to dolls. So that's something I really loved getting and had so much fun with. Oh, and I guess, I should mention, not only can you get Barbie for these mini Barbie Land playsets, but you can also get Ken. And so, jumping into my interview today, like I said, we are getting into all things Kenneth Sean Carson. I'm super excited. I feel like before the Barbie movie, Ken was almost kind of forgotten, as an icon. I feel like Ken's always been super underrated. I had Ken growing up. He was never the main focus of my collections, but I had a few of him. Definitely had more Barbies and Christies and Teresas and Midges, but there was a few Kens. And something we'll talk about today is how they talked about it in the Barbie movies. It's all an assumption Ken is beach or whatever they say in the movie. He's a beach guy. That's his job. And I have to admit, I was looking through my Kens, and the ones from my childhood are all Kens in swimming suits. So just a random fact of my life. So that's definitely true. I feel like the Barbie movie really brought Ken back to the forefront. I feel like no one was talking about Ken, and then the movie came out and Ryan Gosling just did such a great job. And we talked about it with several guests on the show. Ken really made that movie. And So I was really excited. I wanted to touch on Ken in my first season of the Iconic Dollcast, and then I kind of got pushed aside. Then I wanted to do it in my second season, and I found it was really hard to find someone who wanted to just strictly talk about Ken, which surprised me, but I'm glad to say I finally found a guest. Today I have Lindsay on the show. Lindsay is a huge Ken collector. He runs the Instagram account Ken Collector, literally. So that's amazing. Great username. But yeah, so we're going to talk about Ken. Please, as always, follow me on Instagram, Britney Spears Custom Dolls or Iconic Dollcast. You can follow me on TikTok at Britney Spears Dolls. And here is my interview with Lindsay all about Ken. All right, guys, today I am so excited because I'm going to be talking about the iconic Ken doll, which a lot of you guys have been asking for. And I am here today with Lindsay, who is a big fan of Barbie and Ken and runs an Instagram account that has tons of Ken content. So, Lindsay, thank you so much for being on the show today. Before we get into all things Kenneth, Sean, Carson, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. My name is Lindsay. I'm from Washington, D.C. I work with a nonprofit, but one of my biggest hobbies is doll collecting and collecting Ken. I started collecting Ken around 2010, which was when I was in high school. And there was a specific line that really piqued my interest as an adult collector and kind of got me reintroduced to Barbie.
Amazing. So, I mean, you started with Ken, and so that's very uncommon, but I think that is probably why I was like, oh, I got to get him on the show immediately.
Yeah. I definitely started with Ken. As a little boy who was always interested in dolls, I think that I don't know if any listeners can agree with this, but as a boy that's interested in dolls, you definitely kind of can get some weird attention about playing with dolls or expressing interest. But I always found that my mom was a lot more comfortable with me having male dolls compared to female dolls. However, I still enjoyed them. I think even more because it was a unique kind of perspective and seeing kind of myself almost as a doll or and also being able to play with men's fashion in a way that you really don't have any other opportunity to outside of just wearing what you want to wear as a kid. But yeah, I think for me it was a really cool play opportunity because I grew up with all brothers, but I had female cousins who had primarily female dolls when I was a kid. Mainly it was when like my scenes and Bratz were like dominating the toy market. So I was super interested in the Bratz boys and the my scene boys, and they can kind of play with my cousins, my scene girls and Bratz girls. So that's kind of what sparked my interest in Ken and when I kind of revisited dolls as an adult.
Amazing. And no, I mean, that's a very common. I've talked with all sorts of people on the show, people who were fully allowed to play with dolls as a kid, and it didn't matter if it was Barbie or Ken or G.I. Joe or whatever. And then I've also talked to a lot of people who strictly were not allowed to play with dolls as a kid. And I think it's just so interesting because Barbie fans, like the spectrum on where we sit with that is so huge. So it's always really interesting to get that perspective from people. So, I mean, I assume you're a huge Barbie fan as well.
Yes. So I'm definitely a huge Barbie fan as well. I also think too, when I kind of made the decision that I was probably going to start collecting, I really started with Ken because it made me be a little bit more particular and have like a niche about what my collection was going to look like. Because if I knew if I wanted to do Barbie, there's so many more Barbies than there are so many Kens. So it really allowed me to kind of like tailor and limit my collection to something that is a little bit more manageable. I mean, it's gotten a lot bigger so far, but it definitely limits the dolls that I'm looking at and limits the dolls that I'm buying. And nowadays, I still do kind of will gravitate towards Barbies that just speak to me. I really do like collab Barbie dolls. So I was really into when they did the Kith Barbie, and more recently the Ruths. And then in the 90s, they had a whole bunch of different like fashion collaboration dolls. But overall, it's mainly Ken with a few Barbies here and there.
Oh no, that's so cool. And like I said earlier, I've just been trying to find someone who is a dedicated Ken fan to talk to. So I'm
Hmm.
super excited about that. And I mean, that's also really smart. I think we talk about on this show a lot how if you're a Barbie collector and you're trying to get them all, like you'll be collecting forever. And like
For sure.
it's hard to find someone who actually has every single Barbie. You know what I mean?
Right, right. And to be honest, I don't have every desire to have every Ken either, right? Like I really want to have a collection where every single doll is, like at least special or has some sort of, appeal to me, whether it be the outfit or the face sculpt or the hair, or something that's unique. I think that's kind of the most important thing for me when I'm looking at, spending my hard earned dollars on more.
For sure, for sure. And so who is Ken to you?
Well, Ken to me is kind of just like a muse, right? So for me, I think on my Instagram, if you look at some of my photos, it's really about me just kind of restyling Ken. And I think also when you look at, the average Barbie compared to the average Ken, Barbie is most of the time like glamorous and has like cool outfit and comes like very well put together versus a lot of Kens kind of come like kind of questionable outfits. So I really like to find, whether it be like a unique face sculpt or maybe like one cute pair of shoes that Ken has and being able to use that piece and reimagine it in different ways. So I think that's kind of where I kind of started with on my Instagram. It was around the time when the Barbie style page came afloat and I started to notice like more collectors doing doll photography. That's kind of what inspired me to, start taking pictures, but also to just be looking at different details in dolls to kind of add to my collection.
And how big would you say your Ken collection is? Approximately how many do you think you have?
It's between 200 and 300 dolls, but not every single doll is on display. So I have some dolls that I like to keep like new in box. And then I have some dolls, like I said, that I might want to debox just because I need their shirt or I need their jacket. And then their body just goes in the drawer. And then I have a section of dolls that I have that are just like restyled. So I would say it's definitely, I say 200, 300. It's between 250 and $300 for sure.
Wow, that's incredible. And so, I mean, let's get into Ken's history. So
Hmm.
How did Ken come about?
Well, Ken came about in 1961. So the first Barbie came out in 1959, as I'm sure most of your listeners already know. And Ken was kind of introduced as a companion doll to Barbie. And he also was named after, I believe, Ruth Handler's son, whose name was
Hmm.
Kenneth, similar to, Barbie being named after her daughter. So there was a lot of debates. I don't know if you've like probably seen some of the Barbie documentaries or discussion about like what his body would look like
Hmm.
and kind of what his anatomy kind of would look like. We're going to talk about that. But some after many conversations, they kind of came to what his original body was, which was original body is very, very thin compared to like what Ken looks like now. But you have to, keep in mind that like back in those days, they were more so looking at a doll that was meant to wear clothes, not necessarily a doll that was super realistic and not in the kind of the movement that we are in now. So he was introduced as a companion to Barbie, and he was advertised like in like I can't remember. I can see like the commercial in my head, but I remember he's wearing like a tuxedo, and that was something that I kind of revisited after I first started collecting Ken. Like, what did the first Ken look like? Like how was he advertised, what the fashion looked like. And back in the 60s, like the fashions were really, really like high quality. Like
Oh yeah.
all the pieces, I'm sure if you have any vintage dolls, if you've seen them, they had like tags on them. The Ken dolls actually had Ken tags on them. They had real zippers, real buttons, and the quality was like top notch. And that was in the early 60s. In the late 70s, you start to notice that a lot of Barbie and Ken dolls become a little bit more gimmicky. So they might have
Hmm.
like a talking feature or they had a live action feature where they could kind of play sports and like swing a tennis racket by using a little lever on their back. And that was a different sort of era as well. But yeah, in the 1961 is when he was first introduced. And he came out in with brown. I think it was actually three colors. It was a brunette, a brownette, and a blonde. The brownette is like a mix. It's very, very rare and it's very hard to find on the resale market. And then a couple of years later, I believe it was in 1964 because we had Alan's anniversary. They gave Ken a friend who has become super iconic since the Barbie movie came out. But yeah, that's just a little bit about Ken's origins.
Yeah, I did not. I knew that there was a brunette Ken and a blonde Ken. I didn't know that there was one in between. So that's really interesting. I have to tell you right now. So I mean, I had Kens growing up, but like he's never been my main focus, obviously, of my collection. But I have to tell you, I mean, I have a reproduction of the original Ken, and honestly, I hate the flocked
Mm-hmm.
hair. I hate it.
I like the flat hair.
Do
That's
you?
common though. A lot of people don't. And they actually did end up changing that like in the mid 60s because they found that the flock hair would fall out when it got wet. So you'll notice that I think they call him like the shorty Ken, and he kind of has like it's almost like a boxy fade almost, but he has like plastic painted hair. And that was because they found that when kids played with them and the hair got wet, it would literally fall out. So it's actually kind of hard to find Ken, an original 1961 Ken that has all of his flocking intact. One of my really
Hmm.
close doll friends, she found a blonde 1961 Ken at Goodwill for like $5. And she was like, "Do you want this creepy thing?" And I was like, "Hell yes, I want it." So that's one of the ones that are in my collection. But yeah, I think I really do like looking at the vintage dolls just to kind of see like what the fashion was and like what the
Hmm.
trends were. And that's also why I think collecting dolls is, such a fun hobby because you really can see like the different beauty standards and different trends throughout, the time,
Oh
throughout
yeah.
time and throughout
Oh
history.
yeah. And that, that's why Barbie and Ken and all their friends are so timeless because it really is a time capsule of like, oh, this was, this is what was going on then. And you can really see into that when you look at it. And I say I don't like the flocked hair because I was literally just at a doll show, maybe like
Mm-hmm.
two or 3 weeks ago, and I hadn't seen a lot of vintage Kens in my lifetime, other than online or whatever. And then I have my reproduction, which obviously his hair is fine because it's not, I haven't really touched him, but I noticed like pretty quickly, like half of these Kens like are balding, and I don't know. I'm glad, it served its purpose, and I'm glad. I have to be honest. I like the Kens with just the painted hair. It makes it so much simpler. I think because as we'll talk about, I mean, Ken has gone through so many variations, just like Barbie, and they've tried almost everything with him. And like the rooted hair for Ken is pretty cool. It's hard to manage though. So I love the Ken with the just the painted head, just because it makes things more simple. And then I mean, you mentioned gimmicks already, and we're definitely gonna get into that because I mean, Ken is a gimmick at the end of the day, especially with a lot of his dolls prior to now, I would say. But I mean, the gimmicks with Ken are just insane.
They are insane. But I think in a way, it really is just kind of them kind of throwing him into Barbie lines and just making like a male equivalent towards the dolls. And I know uh, probably like one of the most iconic, I would say, of the 90s, or I would say maybe two dolls are probably the Totally Hair Ken and then the Earring Magic Ken, which were both, really big lines. I would say Earring Magic was probably more controversial for certain reasons. But overall, like I think those gimmicks are still kind of fun. I love those
Oh
those
yeah.
sorts of like cringing moments in doll history.
Yeah, it makes him what it is. And I will say, I mean, for being such a, an accessory to Barbie, I do think the effort has always, well, maybe it's tricky, but I'll say always. I feel like the effort for Ken has always been there. I mean, just like Barbie, I mean, he's gone through several upgrades, downgrades. He's had tons of accessories, tons of fashions, tons of stuff you could get for Ken. And I really appreciate that with Mattel because I do think honestly, up until the Barbie movie last year, I think Ken has always been kind of swept under the rug, but it's like, but he's always been here. And I do feel like Mattel has always put a pretty good effort into him.
I mean, I think I would agree and disagree with that to some extent. I think there have been some Kens where there was a lot more intentionality put into the design, and then there's just been, to me, especially looking in the '90s, a majority of the Kens released in the '90s were just beach Ken dolls, and I think it was
Hmm.
actually very funny to kind of mention that, like in the Barb movie, like he's just beach. Like there were so many Ken dolls that were just in swimsuits, and they were super boring, and that's kind of one of the reasons why there's a black Ken friend named Steven that was in the '90s, very popular. I have never been a big fan of Steven, although he has been like the black doll, male doll he's just been so not interesting because every single time he has the same smile and he has the same swimsuit, and there's just been no like effort put into that specific character. But I will say there have been some dolls in the 90s that I think were a little bit more creative. Like I really liked the shaven style Kens in the late 90s. I really liked who else? Big Brother Ken. He came with a little Tommy doll. I thought those were really, really cool, innovative dolls. But overall, like the amount of swimsuit Kens we got it was just too much.
It is definitely a lot. And so, I mean, I'll tell you right now, my favorite Ken era is the 90s because that's when I grew up. That's when I had Ken. What is your favorite Ken era?
Ooh, I would say mod. I like the
Okay.
mod era because I think the fashion, which I just love that fashion in general. And then I also think that was the first time we received a black male friend of Ken who was Brad, who is definitely like, I have two Brads, but I really want to get a new, like never removed from box Brad. So he was introduced in, I believe, 1969 as the companion for Barbie's black friend Christy. So that was like a really iconic, for me, it's like the most iconic like male doll because he was like the first like black friend. Like, and although he wasn't technically Ken, he was the first black male doll made from Mattel. So definitely am a big fan of him, and hopefully we get a reproduction of Brad in the near future.
I'm sure we will. And so obviously the first Black Barbie came out, I think in 1980, where it was just this is
Mm-hmm.
Barbie. So when was the first Black Ken introduced?
So the first Black Ken was introduced, I believe, in like 1981, and he came out with there were like two versions. There was one that has a flocked afro, which was the first variation, and then the second one had a plastic afro. So I believe he was like sensational
Hmm.
Ken, and yeah, that was the first African American doll, Ken doll that was actually named Ken, and he was introduced in '81. So he was a pretty iconic doll as well.
Very interesting. Very cool. I do not have one of those. I need to get one. But just going back, so I'll show you and I'll post this on my Instagram when the episode comes out. But this is a Ken that I specifically remember from my I mean, it is. This is my Ken from my childhood. Obviously, it is swimsuit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to get into. I mean, there's so much more to Ken than people know, but I think his controversial moments are pretty incredible. And I also feel
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of them were obviously taken way, way out
Context.
of control, you know? And
Yeah.
so, I mean, just getting into Ken's controversialness, and I feel like that is one of the strangest things because it's like, I feel like the first thing about Ken was like, oh, well, he doesn't have a penis. And it's just kind of like, I mean, why would he? Do you know what I
Why would
mean?
he? Yeah, it's very weird, and I think but it's also something you see. I know we're focusing on Ken, but we've seen this conversation about like Barbie's body so many different times, and I think as kids we're really not thinking of that. Like, I mean, there probably was one time I was thinking like Barbie has really big boobs, but like overall, we're thinking about restyling the dolls. We're thinking about telling stories, and I just think the conversations about the anatomy are just they're just kind of like boring and useless, really, because kids aren't super concerned about that. And obviously, if they were to make him actually have an appendage, that I don't think that would go over too smooth either.
But yeah, it would cause way more controversy.
I don't think there's really a way to win that whole debate. Like, what would people actually like Ken's body to look like? I don't think they would really have an answer or care.
Exactly. And same with Barbie. It's like Mattel can't win. And I do feel like Mattel gets a lot of flack for tons of stuff, and some of it is definitely warranted, but it's like people ignore all this stuff where it's like, okay, but what do you want them to do? It's a
And
doll.
another thing too about controversial dolls, which this is a little bit more recent than his, the first Ken, but when they did like the whole doll evolves campaign and they finally like launched like the curvy Barbie and petite and tall, I think it was about a year later they did the same thing with Ken, where they did a broad Ken, the regular, or I don't know what they call the classic body. It's just original Ken, broad and slim. They had a man bun Ken. And I don't know why, but I remember that doll was just on all of the headlines that Ken had a man bun. And or it's still that to me was just also very, very strange about that being such a like big talking point about Ken having a man bun and being like a hipster.
Very, very strange the things that people will go after when it comes to Barbie. It's very weird.
Hmm.
And so getting into the more iconic Kens. Obviously, we have the first original Ken. He's very iconic. He's the first one, and then he's had some pretty big moments. And so, obviously, I think you mentioned Earring Magic Ken. So that is actually the best selling Ken of all time.
Hmm. I don't have them yet.
I don't have that one either. And so I'm interested. I mean, I think a lot of, you see all these BuzzFeed things like the most controversial Barbies of all time and all these articles about Barbies getting pulled off the shelves and recalled. Generally, it's not the truth. So, do you know if that doll was actually pulled off of the shelves?
I've heard mixed reports about that. I've heard that he was pulled off the shelves when people pointed out that his necklace looked like something else. But I also don't know that if he was actually pulled off the shelves or if people just, especially gay men collectors, ran to get him because they just thought he was like a funny thing to have.
Yeah, I know a lot of people think like the pregnant Midge doll was recalled, but it wasn't. And
No,
so
yeah, that's one I definitely know was for a fact. That doll was a great selling doll and it wasn't recalled. It was just she just ran her, she had her ear and they just stopped producing the doll, but she was on the shelves for at least 5 years.
right. And I mean, one thing I will say about Mattel is they are brutal. And if they're making money, like I don't see them. And if what I've read is true, and it really is the best-selling Ken doll of all time, I don't actually see them pulling that from the shelves. Because at the end of the day, they're a
No.
business, and it's not harming anyone.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Right. Now there is one Ken doll that never made it to the shelves, and he was mentioned in the Barbie movie, and that's Sugar Daddy's Ken.
Hmm.
Now that doll I remember because I think this was around like 2010, 2011 when I like started collecting. And this was back in the day before the Mattel Creation site was Mattel Creations. I think it was Barbie Collector at this point. And they had a Silkstone collection. And this was like a Palm Springs collection. And these dolls in this time they ran from I think $50 to $75, and they were obviously Silkstone. So that means for people that aren't familiar with Silkstones, they're pretty much just like heavier dolls that are meant to emulate porcelain. Now, this doll was supposed to be in that line, but when the press caught wind of his name and his outfit that was in a very, very like bright suit, they kind of said that he was supposed to be like a pimp. So they pretty much pulled him. They never even produced him. Although those dolls were obviously always meant for adult collectors and not meant for kids, which I thought was super like just sucked because a lot of adult collectors were robbing a really, really cool doll. So I was super excited to see that they ended up making a version of him after the Barbie movie came out.
Yeah, and I ended up getting the one that they did from the Barbie movie, and yeah, there was a lot of uproar about that. Like, was it real? Was it not? And I'm like, no, this was a real thing, and that one actually did get pulled. And so, I mean, obviously, what's so interesting to me is that Mattel with their Barbies and their Kens, it's like it's no secret that there's just, I mean, with Ken specifically in the 90s, I would say, I mean, the gay coding in that was very
It was there.
extreme. I mean,
Hmm.
you can't deny it. And like the earring magic one, it's like, I mean, looking at this guy with this mesh gold crop top, like is not much like, this is almost a little bit gayer to me. And it's what I find so interesting is that like it does seem like Mattel is very scared to have any kind of direct, I don't even know the word, just they don't like to connect things as being gay. Do you know what I mean? And I say that in quotes, which is so interesting to me because if you look at who's collecting Barbies, especially adults, and I'm
Mm.
not getting stereotypical here, but kind of because it is a valid point. The biggest audience for Barbie, as in the adult world, are gay people. And I just think it's so
Hmm.
interesting that they, will put out products, pull them back, like say, oh no, he's not this, he's not that. It's like, just let it go. Like, I don't, it's really weird.
It's because Barbie really is like Mattel's most protected brand, so they're always super careful about doing things that can be a little bit too controversial. So even when they changed Barbie's body and they made a curvy Barbie, that was something that I'm pretty sure they had been working on for at least a decade before they rolled that out. So I think that they like to play it safe and give us little Easter eggs or make things maybe gay coded, but not actually label it a gay Ken doll. I think one example of that that's been more recent was if you look at like the first wave of the BMR line, there was a Ken doll that had green hair, had makeup, had painted nails, and some would say, that could be considered a queer presenting doll, but that wasn't exclusively labeled that. And I think, in my opinion, I don't necessarily need them to label that, but I do think that I do like the direction they're going in a sense of diversity and making other people feel seen in doll form. I think that's a really, really big important thing.
Agreed. And it very may well be also, they love to have Barbie's open-endedness, her story, and that's
Hmm.
probably the case with Ken as well. And then just going back to Barbie, something that I think is also really interesting is that like according to like the story, like Barbie and Ken have never been married. And I just find that so interesting because how many freaking wedding sets have been put out of Barbie and Ken?
That don't make no sense to me, them saying that,
It's
because
so
they've had
weird.
so many wedding sets that even when they had the pregnant Midge doll, there was one that it was kind of controversial because she didn't have like a wedding ring on. So there were updated versions that came with a wedding ring or came with a little like cutout in the back. So they have kind of produced Barbie dolls that are married, but I guess they're just trying to say that overall, like Barbie is not married, so that it just gives people more, I guess, creative options with play and storytelling. But at the same time, also what you're saying, like it doesn't really make sense. But she's also supposed to be, a 16-year-old, and she has all these careers. So there's a lot of stuff that just don't. It ain't adding up.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, I think even if you watch the original Barbie commercial, they like market her in a wedding dress.
In a wedding dress.
This is so
Yeah.
weird? And so Ken, he's gone through a lot of changes, obviously.
Hmm.
There was the big breakup, and what I think, I mean, I remember, I think when that was all happening, when Barbie and Ken broke up, I was kind of, I mean, most of the time when I talk to people, they talk about, okay, I had Barbies as a kid. Then I took a little bit of a break, wasn't really interested in them. And then I got into adulthood and I was like, give me more, give me more. And so I remember when that happened and just being kind of like, that's weird. Barbie and Ken break up. They bring in this new dude. He's a total flop, and then Ken comes back. So he's definitely iconic.
Right. Yeah, I think that was also kind of like a reflection of the times, right? Because I think they were trying to play into like the whole like tabloid magazine era when we were really like obsessed with celebrities and who like Brad Pitt and Angelina and Jolie were dating. That kind of moment, they were trying to give it to Barbie and Ken. I also think too that was their way of trying to appeal to older girl collectors, like maybe that are in like the tween range, so that they can kind of be a little bit more into or infatuated with dolls, even though they might have otherwise felt like they were growing out of collecting dolls. So I think that's also a very weird but interesting era of Barbie too.
Super weird. And I just have to mention it because, that's a big part of the whole Barbie storyline is when they broke up.
Hmm.
It's so stupid, in my opinion. But whatever, it is what it is. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about value. So, I mean, are there
Hmm.
like, what kind of Kens would you say are just like super hard to get?
Ooh, well, obviously the Brads, because they've only made two variations of Brad, and those both came out in the late 1960s. There was a bendable leg Brad, and there was a talking Brad. So I think for mine, I have a mint one that's out of the box with the wrist tag. I got him at a Barbie convention, and I spent like I think around $200, which is a very,
Wow.
very good deal for him. But if you want to find one of those that's like new in box, it's going to be around $600 easily. Another one that has really grown in value, and I think you mentioned this on another episode, is Alan. Alan,
Yes.
pre Barbie movie, nobody was checking for Alan. Like I'm lucky that I have two Allens now, and I got them before the Barbie movie came out. But I literally got a four. It was a lot of four dolls, like 1960 dolls on Craigslist. It was a 60s Barbie with like a bubble cut. a Midge, an Alan, and a Ken with the painted hair. I paid $20 for all four dolls, and they were dressed.
Wow.
And like, yeah, and you could really just get away with, you could probably, before the Barbie movie, you could easily find like an Alan out of box fully dressed for like $50 on eBay. Like they were really not going for that much. And those dolls have really, really skyrocketed after the Barbie movie. Obviously, Earring Magic is a really expensive doll because he's just a very iconic doll. A lot of it's always the new in box dolls that are obviously going to be much more higher in value. Kins that are new in box, especially the number one, are really, really valuable because it's the first one. And then obviously when you're finding the number one Kins out of the box, you always are looking to see if they have missing flocked hair because that flocking always comes out. A lot of the Barbie basic Kins are really, really high in value. That's a kind of like the line that got me started in my doll collecting journey. Those are the ones that come to mind for me, but those are also the ones that I'm always just looking at like the eBay value for.
Yeah, definitely the Alan situation is something I've talked about. It was wild. And I just remember Alan had been on my list forever, but I was like, oh, no need, I'll get him when I get him, because like you could, I mean, literally probably even like $30 you could get him for. Maybe they have to
Yeah.
do a little bit of cleanup on him, but I just remember I went and saw the movie, and 2 days later I checked for Alan, and it was like $300, $400, and I was like, oh my god! And thank goodness they did the repro of him. I was like, I'll just get
Mm-hmm.
this. This is
And
ridiculous.
another thing too that's really interesting, and I think overall I've just seen the value of Kins go up. But when you look at pre-Barbie movie, a lot of Barbie collectors are really just focusing on Barbie. And when they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to, declutter and get rid of dolls, they used to always be the Ken dolls because there were dolls that they personally weren't valuing compared to their bubble cuts and their ponytails. But now I think I've just seen overall the value of dolls has really skyrocketed after this
Oh
movie,
yeah.
and that includes Ken as well.
For sure. I mean, the Barbie movie really changed everything, and it pisses me off a little bit.
Right. And I feel the same. I feel like a lot of collectors feel the same way, right? Because it gives us a little bit of kind of validation for our hobby. But at the same time, it's like we're the ones that's going to be paying these high prices now because everybody is on these dolls that did not give a damn about dolls
Oh yeah.
a day before the Barbie movie came out.
Oh
So,
yeah. And hopefully eventually that dies out. And I also do think it's so smart. Reproductions really do drive those prices down just because it's like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna buy a 300 Allen doll, or are you gonna buy the one that's $60, on Mattel Creations? Even though it's a reproduction, it's basically the same thing. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. And I will say though too, I know I'm on my Brad soapbox, but I really want them to do a reproduction Brad because they have never done a reproduction of that doll before. Like even before this recent, Silkstone Allen came out, there's been a couple of reproduction Allens that have been in gift sets.
Hmm.
And then obviously I don't know this to be true, but it feels like there were way more vintage Allens produced than there were Brads. And I think we did Curtis, who was like a variation of Brad. But so it seemed like it's easier to find Allens on the resale market than it is to find Brads. And I keep on talking about this, and now I feel like I'm
No,
shooting
it's
myself in the
great.
foot
No,
because all these people will
Brad.
be looking for Brads now.
Oh, well, maybe, but
Yeah.
I love that. And so, what would you say some of your favorite Ken gimmicks are? Because, like I said earlier, Ken has got some gimmicks. So, what are some of your favorite?
I would say I think I like the free moving Kens. I think those are really, really cool because they actually came with like different sports equipment. So they came with like a tennis racket and a little golf club, and they actually have a really cool lever that pushes out, and you can like have them swing, play sports. I can show you later when I bring one out. That was cool. I do like the talking dolls. I like I don't have him, but I kind of want him. It was like the hip hop rapping, like Barbie and Ken. I think that was kind of a cool gimmick. Yeah, like those are some that come to mind. I feel like recently we really don't get gimmicky dolls like that.
Oh
I
no, no,
think the
no.
last one we got as far as gimmicky Kens was the one that came out maybe around 2010 and 11, and he had like the heart on his chest, and he had a T-shirt, and he pretty much you could record your voice
Hmm.
or whatever and play it back. I think that was like the last gimmicky one we've gotten. But yeah, I'm kind of into the gimmicky dolls. I wouldn't be mad if they did another one.
Oh no, I live for the gimmicks. A gimmick is what it is, and it's there for a reason. And yeah, I mean
Right.
now, I mean we'll talk about where Ken's at in just a second with like fashionistas and stuff. But I mean it is pretty boring. But I mean
It is.
I love a good gimmick, and like I mean totally hair Ken. The hair play was great. I know
Hmm.
that just before we started today, I was kind of just like looking up some vintage Kens and 90s Kens on
Hmm.
eBay just to refresh my memory. And he definitely likes to shave a lot.
Yes, I do like. I don't know how to mention the shaving dolls. I like those a lot too. That one, I think they did do one pretty recently, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and I can remember finding him at Marshalls. But he was a shaving Ken, and he came with like a full like bathroom sink and a little razor, and I thought that that was a pretty cool gimmick as well. They did a black version of that one. I think that one was shave. There's like shaving Ken, and then there was like a shave in style Ken. But they did an AA version of him that came out in like the late '90s. I was able to find him for a decent price on Macari pretty recently. He was on my list for a long time because there were very few black male Ken dolls that came out in the '90s that weren't just like beach Steven dolls. I think it
Right.
was that shaving doll. There was like a doctor one, and then they did an AA version of Big Brother Ken that came with Tommy. Another version of that that was actually canceled, which I thought was really, really cool, was there was supposed to be like a Ken doll in the late '90s that was like Tommy's first haircut, where you could
Hmm.
like cut Tommy's hair or something. If you look at this website, it's called Man Behind the Doll. They have a whole bunch of like archives of like every single Ken doll that came out, I think up until like 2010 or 2011. But they also have like production samples of dolls that were like canceled or dolls that were, like for example, Sugar Daddy's Ken. That
Hmm.
he's on that website as well. So that was a really, really cool website. But yeah, definitely love the gimmicks, love the shaving Kens as well.
Yeah, and I can't escape a single episode obviously without talking about the Barbie movie, and I just feel like the Barbie movie had such a great impact for Ken because if we want to be real, I mean, you're watching the Barbie movie, Ken steals the show for sure. And I mean, Ryan Gosling did such a great job on it, but I mean, it really brought Ken to the front. And I think for the most part, people had kind of forgotten about Ken. And I do feel like, gimmicks aside, with the movie at least, they brought that really campiness back to Ken, which is
It did.
what I enjoy the most about Ken. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and to be honest, I'm just here for the dolls that we got out of the Barbie movie. I think
Hmm.
we got some really
So
good
many.
dolls. The denim one, the Western Ken, Sugar Daddy Ken. I have been like last year was it was a rough year on my doll budget. I just want to say that, but I really do love all like the fun like pieces we got out of it. And I also do kind of appreciate the the take that Greta took with Ken and him kind of living in literally Barbie land and everything kind of revolving around her to kind of stepping outside in the real world and seeing like what misogyny looks like and becoming an incel. Like it was kind of sad, but at the same time, his character motivations made sense for what he, experienced in Barbie Land versus seeing what goes on in the real world.
Oh yeah, such a smart movie. So good. Just everything about it really. I'm so shocked they didn't do an Alan from the movie.
Who listen? It's not too late. I feel
Oh
like
God.
they could come out with one.
They
We're
could.
still getting the I am Knufkin that was available for pre-order last year. That's supposed to ship, I think, later this summer. So they really could get an Allen because they know that collectors and fans are really eating up that character. So we could get
Yeah.
a Michael Cera Arab.
I think it's pretty inevitable for the most part. I'm like, oh, I kind of hope it's died down a little bit, only because my wallet is empty.
Right.
But yeah, I figured that would be one of the first ones they did. But yeah. So what would you say Ken is like now? Because I assume, and I do know this. So like Ken is Ken, Barbie is Barbie now. Like they're all Barbie and they're all Ken. So where is Ken today, in your opinion?
Ken is kind of like what you said. Ken is Ken and Barbie is Barbie. I think Ken is kind of what you make out of Ken. So I think definitely through the fashionistas line, I've learned to kind of like take the pieces of the doll that I like and just kind of accept it for what it is. So those are plague line dolls. They're $10. If I like, the head sculpt, I'll get the doll. If I like just the shoes, I'm going to get the doll. So I have to have some sort of element that I like to get them. I'm fully accepting that the full package isn't going to be what I want as an adult collector, but I also understand that, I'm not necessarily the intended audience for those dolls. So that's kind of how I see it. And I also have been, collecting for a long time, and the majority of the Kens I get, they're never like 100% what I want to see in a doll. It's always like something I like, and I can, use my own creativity to make it what I want it to be, or make it more fashionable, or make it just look better, or do whatever I want.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that because I do. I mean, you know this, you're on social media. I mean, the complaints that come in about these new Barbies are just so outrageous. And it's like, hello, like, do you not, like, let's not forget that this is like you said, a $10 doll. How much do you think they can do with that price point? And also, like, it's not meant for adults. We buy them,
Yeah.
but like the complaints I see about the fashionistas is, I mean, and I don't buy them very often, but I do sometimes, and it's like, yeah, this is a
Mm.
great price for something that is literally meant to be played with.
Yeah, and I will say though, sometimes I am a little. I do give them some more critiques when the faces are really wonky, or like the eyes are misplaced, or the lips are like way too high in that place where they should be, or the pixelation we've been getting. That's kind of been disappointing. But as far as like the outfits not being cute, like I've kind of accepted that already. I will say I would like them to kind of go back to doing some rooted Kens and
Hmm.
some molded Kens. I know you mentioned earlier how you prefer the like the painted and molded hair. I'm kind of like a 50-50. I think there are some hairstyles that just look better as molded versus some that have rooted hair that actually look really, really good. So like a couple of years ago, they came out with like that like Ken that had really long hair. He was kind of wearing a tie-dye tank top.
Hmm.
Yeah, kind of had like a surfer vibe.
Yep.
When I saw that doll at first, I was just like, I don't really like him. But then I saw him in the store, and I was like, oh, okay, like he's kind of cool. I don't have a doll. I don't have a Ken that has long hair like this. And then once I like took his head off and put him on a made to move body and restyled him, like I was kind of obsessed with that doll. And it was one of those things where like I just did not see it until I physically had the doll in my possession and was able to customize him and just give him a new outfit.
It is what it is, and like I still love Barbie, and things have just changed, and price points have changed. And earlier, I think
Mhm.
you were talking about it. I might be wrong. Okay, so obviously with Barbie, they've done a bunch of different curvy Barbie, all that stuff. I have never seen in a store a Ken doll with a different body type. I did not know that that
You
was
you probably have, you just haven't noticed. So
okay.
they do have broadkins and then they have slimkins. So the slimkins, they'll literally are shorter than the regular kin is, but the heads are the same size. So
Mhm.
sometimes you might notice, okay, this doll's head looks huge. It's because he's on a much like thinner and shorter body. And they used to be like labeled, but now they're not. They're just kind of thrown in to the fashionistas line. So I mean, I can grab. Actually, I can just walk into my little doll closet right now. I might as well. But yeah, like if you look at the different like Ken fashionistas that are on the shelf, they do still do the broad body pretty often. The slim body is a little bit less common, but he's out there. So like the newer Ken doll that has the hearing aid, I don't know if you've
Mhm.
seen him. He's like African American. He has like
Yeah.
a really weird shirt. He's on a broad body.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, yeah, I didn't. I guess I've just never noticed because I was like, oh, that's
yeah,
so weird they haven't done that with Ken, but clearly they have. Very cool.
yeah. And I also will say too, it's also not super noticeable because if you're rebodying dolls and you care about the mate to move, they don't make a mate to move broad. They have the new muscular body, which is somewhat similar, but it's not the same. And they don't have a made to move slim Ken body yet.
Okay. Well, hopefully they get some more in there. And just a couple more questions. So, if you had to pick, what is your favorite Ken or Brad? I'm going to assume it's Brad. What's your favorite one of all
Well,
time?
okay, so my favorite one is not. I do love Brad, but it's not my favorite Brad. It's definitely my mini me, which is
Oh, I have one
the
too.
yeah, no, he's the 2021 Barbie convention Ken that was in their gift set. It was called Power Pair. So my favorite Barbie designer is Carlo Noera, who I've met a couple of times. He's super nice. He definitely gives like the most like diverse and uses the most interesting face sculpts, in my opinion, of all the Barbie designers. He did this set, and this was also like the first Barbie convention that I attended, which was virtual in 2021 because of COVID. But when I saw this Ken, I was just like obsessed because he has the same face sculpt as like the first doll that was in like my collection, which was like this Barbie Basics Ken. So I had like a special connection with him. So he's definitely like my favorite, hands down.
I love that. And what is the most recent Ken doll you've purchased?
The most recent one isn't technically Ken. He's Alan. He's a Silkstone Alan.
I have to tell you, I really like the Silkstone bodies are nice, but I just, every time one hits the floor, because it happens all the time, I get so scared.
They are super fragile. I have a couple more Silkstones. I have the Madman Silkstone Kens. I never got the Joan. I don't know if you're hip to like Mad Men, but it was a really really cool like show about the 1960s. They came out I think around like 2010 or 2009. But they did a Silkstone Barbie collab back in the day, and they did four dolls. So they had Don Draper, who's like the main character of the series. John Hamm plays him in the show, and then Roger Sterling, and they did a Betty, who is like Don Draper's wife, who's blonde, who looks like a traditional Barbie, and then Joan, who has like red hair, who's like the most gorgeous, I think one of the most gorgeous Silkstones they've ever done. But yeah, those are some of the first Silkstones I've had in my collection, and I got those like 2010, 2011 when they came out.
Yeah, those are awesome. Okay, so we obviously you collect Ken, you collect Barbie. Are there any other dolls that you get into?
Not really. I have a few my scenes in my
Right.
collection, but they're not really the focus. I have a couple of Integrity Toys dolls, but they're so expensive.
Right.
I can't see I can't consistently collect them, but I really do like them for their clothes. I have one American Girl boy doll
Oh,
in my
you do?
collection
I
who is
love
like still in the
American Girl.
box. But that was more for like the child in me that really wanted like a boy American Girl doll as a boy, but they just did not make them.
I
But
know.
yeah, mainly I focus, as you can see, on Ken, and then Barbie has definitely, made her way into my collection. But Ken is always like the star in my collection.
I love
So
that. Well, so, Lindsay, thank you so much. I mean, I told you earlier, I've been trying to find someone to talk about Ken for so long, and this was such a great discussion, and I appreciate your time so much. And it was just so nice hearing about Ken from your perspective, just as someone who started with collecting Ken before Barbie. I think that's incredible. So, thank you so much. Where can people find you on social media?
yeah, so you guys can find me on Instagram at Ken Collector. It's just Ken Collector. There's no spaces, no underscores, at Ken Collector. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll keep in touch. We'll have to see if that Allen comes out. And I'll let you know, I'm going to head to Walmart tonight. So I'm going to go scope out the Kens and see if I can figure out these body type differences because I did not know that existed.
Take a peek and let me know if you see some new fashion packs, because I have been seeing the leaks on those, and I kind of want some more
Oh,
fashion.
yeah. Well, I'm so excited for like I said, I don't really get into the fashionistas too much, but I am enjoying these 65th anniversary ones. So I'm excited for like the totally hair reimagined
Yes,
and
with
the
the
Western
beard.
Ken. Yeah. So I'm super
They
excited
both
for
look
that.
awesome. Yeah, super excited for those too.
Yeah. Well, we'll chat soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, so that was my interview with Lindsay. Please follow Lindsay on Instagram at Ken Collector. Lindsay, again, thank you so much for being on the show. That was so much fun. I'm so glad I finally got to do an episode about Ken. And also, I'm so excited. If you're here, if you made it through the whole episode, we kind of ended that talking about those 65th anniversary fashionistas and how bad I wanted them. I mean, I'm always saying that, but it's nice to know those are finally hitting shelves. Very excited about that. Next time on the Iconic Dollcast, I'm super excited. I have my friend Damien on the show. Damien runs the Instagram account and podcast Bichiatry. I had the pleasure of being on Damien's podcast, and I talked all about my passion for the Britney Spears doll and the custom dolls and all that fun stuff. So definitely check it out. But next week, I'm going to have Damien on my show, and oh gosh, you guys don't want to miss this one. It is such a fun episode. There was no real layout to it. I just wanted to, Damien's podcast is very similar to mine. He talks a lot about dolls and toy collections and so much more. I've just found that we have so much in common. So I just kind of freestyle this episode. We talk about, collecting dolls, our favorite dolls and Barbies. We talk about the Little Mermaid movie again, because I will not let it go. We talk about some iconic films like Troop Beverly Hills and Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. So definitely check that out next week. As always, please follow me on Instagram, Britney Spears Custom Dolls or Iconic Dollcast. Follow me on TikTok at Britney Spears Dolls. Please, if you are enjoying this show, leave me a 5-star rating, send me a review, and if you want to be on the show, please reach out, hit me up on Instagram, or you can email me at iconicdollcast@gmail.com, and I will talk with you guys next time.